Mr. McCarthy. Do you want to sit here?
No. What an honor it is to be in ASU speaking as an individual that never made it to college. To come here and obviously communicate what I see is going on here and talk to you guys. But this is not a formal speech, of course, so if you have any questions, feel free to interject at any time and we can have a dialogue. I'm going to give you some context of my background, and then from there I'm going to take from that context, I'm going to transition into what I see is going on in the world, and then I'm going to transition from there into what I think we need to do about it. So the first and foremost, I'll tell you that my background at 18 years old, when I graduated high school, I drove here from upstate New York to Phoenix, and the reason that is because my brother was stationed at Luke Air Force Base. So I had seen Arizona for the first time when I was about 13, and I fell in love with it because where I grew up, it was covered in snow for about 6 months of the year. So Phoenix was very attractive to a young man like myself, and immediately when I graduated high school, I got in my car and drove to Phoenix, and I've been here ever since. That's 16 years ago. And since that time, I met my wife early. I was 18 when Lexi and I met, and when we met, from there we were able to start our careers in terms of being entrepreneurs. In terms of business, I was fortunate with college, and I'll tell you why. Because I was headhunted at a young age, 18, I was headhunted by University of Phoenix Online. Because a little bit before then, about 3 or 4 months before then, I had established myself as an authority in terms of call centers. So I had gravitated to the call center environment just kind of on accident. That's where I met Lexi. And then from there, I was headhunted by University of Phoenix Online. I don't know if you guys paid much attention to University of Phoenix Online back in the early 2000s. This is when the .com online university boom really started. So at 18 years old, what was going on for me is I was in a position where I was enrolling students into college at 18 years old. And interestingly, through that process, I learned a lot of things about college in that 2 years of experience, which I'll share in just a moment too. But from there, entrepreneurial-wise, I left University of Phoenix, started a few businesses, mainly in real estate. We started a global brand in the cosmetics industry, and we've thoroughly enjoyed the free market system that this country has. It's a beautiful system, and the free market, free enterprise system is a wonderful thing. And it's something that I can speak a lot towards in terms of how beautiful it is, but we'll go there maybe in a little bit as well. So entrepreneurship, we've started some businesses. Simultaneously, we had 4 children, and my business partner, Lexi, my wife, her and I have done all these things together, of course. And what I'll tell you is that at 8 years old, my mother ran for city council in that small town I grew up in. And at 8 years old, I witnessed politics firsthand at a local city level. My mother was my hero. When I watched her run for office, I watched her win, and she became the first woman council member in the town I grew up in. So that was extremely impactful on me for a few reasons. A, I said I'll never be involved in politics ever in my life, right? And then B, I also paid particular attention to politics. For some strange reason, I gravitated towards observation of what's going on, probably unhealthily. So, there's some context of my background. I've been studying politics from my vantage point since the time I can remember. I started in business. We have experienced success in the business world without a formal education in terms of higher education. So I come to you from a whole different world. Now, again, transitioning now to what I see as our big problems. We are in a war as a country, and right now it's a Cold War. But it's do not be confused about what's going on out there. It's 110% a war, and there's a multiple fronts of this war, and I'm going to explain this to you guys. And I think when I do, I think I may either open your eyes up a little bit, or maybe I can at least expose you to what I see from my vantage point. We have a culture war in our country right now. The culture of our society is diminishing. It's no longer okay and acceptable to be a husband and wife with children at home. It's no longer okay necessarily to have Christian values or Judeo-Christian values. It's something that is continuously under attack now. The church community is ashamed. They're actually afraid to speak in politics. And as a matter of fact, you guys have probably heard this, you're not supposed to talk about politics and religion. That's called a culture war. You are supposed to talk about politics and religion. That's not true. So then you transition that culture war, and then you transition that to the fact that the left of our country, the Democratic Party of our country, is now out and out a socialist communist party. And you can deny it, you can fight it, you can say whatever you want, but it's a matter of fact at this point in time that the largest or second largest, depending on the election year, party of our country is now out and out communist. That's a fact. The pillars of communism are the same pillars that are being enjoyed by the Democratic Party. So again, this is a multiple front war that I'm describing to you, and this is one front of that war. Another front of that war is a border of our country that has been porous my entire life, and your entire life. We have watched now over 30 million illegal aliens enter into our country. And I know it seems crude because these are people that are looking for the American dream. And it is crude. Life is crude a little bit. You can't break laws because life is unfair. And in this country, if you do not have a border, you do not have a country. And that's not racism. That's just common sense. Now, what I've been proposing as I've been on the campaign trail is what's in our Constitution. Other countries should adopt the values of Americanism, Western values. They should encourage their governments to change. That's what leadership is. It's not a good idea to allow your country to be weakened from within, and let me explain to you what that weakening looks like. When you have 30 million illegal people in this country that are extracting from the welfare state that both the right and the left have allowed to be created, it can only last so long. It's fiscally irresponsible. You can only have it to where 30 million people take advantage of the system so long before the system fails. And that's maybe part of the goal. Okay, so this is one front of the war as I see it. And then the third front of the war is there is a religious ideology that a lot of people really don't feel comfortable discussing. But what we've witnessed now in the last 10, 12 years is we've watched our country now have 3,400 active Islamic cells alive and ready to go. Right now, 3,400 in this country today. And this isn't me trying to stroke fear. This is just the facts. Okay, well, I tell you all this because this war is a multiple front war. So what does that look like for us? What does that look like for all of you in this room? Well, it's organized crime. Because in order for crime to take place, and a lot of this crime that's been taking place, has to happen with political cover. You can't have organized crime unless you have political cover. What that means is that a lot of your elected officials, unfortunately, are very corrupt. And I think that's being exposed now on a national level. So why would a young guy like myself take away from my life, take away from the conveniences that we've created for ourselves? Frankly, we're enjoying this beautiful system that this country's created. Stop what I'm doing, put my life on hold, and jump into this mess. The reason why is the same reason why young men and women during times of war stop what they're doing and get involved. Because if we don't, we're going to lose our country. And like I said, I'll open this up for questions and we can have an in-depth analysis on anything you want. As a federal senator candidate, you have to actually know everything about everything. Did you guys know that? It's a true story. You're supposed to know everything, right? So the system that we're in today, and this is the last thing I'll say before I open this up for questions. The system that we're in today in the United States, the political climate that we're in is very dangerous. Because at the federal level, if we continue to allow for bureaucrats to own and operate Washington, D.C. If we continue to allow D.C. to have their tentacles so far, then every state in the country, they pick who the federal senators are. They determine who the congressional seats are. If we continue to allow that to happen, then we're going to continue this progressive state. I do want to say one more thing. I forgot about this. I'm glad I just remembered. I want to read you this email. Do you guys know who's Jeremiah Willett? You guys know Jeremiah Willett? He's the head of the ASU Republican Club. Mm-hmm. You guys' split club, right? Yep. The club you guys split from?
Correct.
I love you guys, by the way, for splitting from that club. I don't know who it is. I don't know which one but good for you to stand up for what's right. This was an email exchange back and forth between the leader of that group and my scheduler, who has been trying to make sure that we obviously we want to talk to every Republican group there is. My name is Tanya Anderson, blah, blah, blah. Dear Tanya, college Republicans at ASU have no interest in hearing from Mr. McCarthy. Thank you. Have a good day. I want you to think about this for a second. The other college Republican club on this campus will not listen to a candidate for federal office that has more signatures, I can guarantee you, than the other person that was appointed unconstitutionally. That's what our own party is producing, if you're a Republican. These are scary times. And back to the system that I'm describing. We got a tracker in the back of the room here, and I'm going to point you out. You don't mind, do you? No. So this is an example. This is important for you guys to see. You got to see this firsthand. This is a guy, for example, that's paid from the McSally camp or Mitch McConnell's camp to ensure that I'm followed and everything I say is tracked. I'm just running for office. Now think about that for a second. That's the climate that we're in today. So when you have the courage to walk away from an organization that's corrupted, like the other group here, I don't know, what is their name?
The College Republicans at ASU. They
Republicans.
banned Kelly Ward during the last Senate election.
They banned Kelly Ward
from speaking.
They wouldn't allow her to speak. Wow, that's the world we live in today. They can only ignore you for so long. Okay, let me ask you some questions. I know you guys have some good ones, I hope.
Well, why do you think that they don't want you to speak for them? Like, what did they give you any reason, or what's your best guess for that?
I have from what I've heard is that the leadership in that club works closely with the governor and the establishment politicians, the establishment Republicans. That term's kind of thrown around a lot, the establishment. But what I'll tell you is that a lot of people are establishment by accident. They're just involved with that little clique, they don't even know it. So I don't mean to ostracize a group of people for that, because there's probably some good Republicans in that group.
They just don't know any better.
They just don't know any better.
Right.
Call them retail Republicans or squishy Republicans, whatever you want to call them.
They're also 18, 19 years old too. They're
That's
just in this for the first time.
That's true. That's true. Yes, sir.
All right, so you've outlined your view of the culture war. What is your plan to win it?
To win the race?
To win the culture war?
To win the culture war. I think our country has had a lack of leadership for a long time.
Right.
I mean, when you look at cultural leaders of our time, it's really hard to define someone that comes to mind other than, you think of the norms, like, JFK, of course, and Martin Luther King. I guess some now would say probably Reagan.
Yeah.
Right?
Trump, probably.
Trump, right? They throw that in there. And some people say Obama, depending on your political viewpoint. But when you actually look at the substance of their leadership, you'll find that in a lot of cases, you're only as fast as your leader. And the leadership of our country has been lacking for a long time. Ronald Reagan, for example, when he won, one of the promises that he made was he was going to get rid of the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education. That was just enacted by Jimmy Carter.
Right.
The idea is nowhere in our Constitution does it specify that there is an allowance for the Federal Department of Education. That was a campaign promise.
Yeah.
Well, not only did it not happen, we're almost 40 years later, And the federal Department of Education is a $60 billion a year budget, line item on the budget.
They keep changing it.
Right.
Seems like every administration.
So I feel like there's a lack of leadership where people, they say one thing, they do another, even in our own party, even in our celebrated leaders. We just haven't had someone that really stands behind their convictions. So I think that's how you win, one way of winning. I think the other way of winning also is promoting things that are pure and moral. You know, you can't even talk about morality any longer. You can't even talk about the idea, you bring up the name Jesus Christ, and my God, it makes people feel uncomfortable. It's unbelievable. Regardless if you're a Christian or not, regardless if you have any desire. I'm not a preacher, but no one can look at the example of Christ and say, "Oh, this is anything but a beautiful thing," and that should be okay to talk about. But when you can't even say that name in a school or in a place, so I think kind of maybe another way to win that culture war is to, rather than being dormant when Antifa and these organizations and these people are fighting, is being louder than them. And that's what we intend on doing as well.
This is more of a statement than a question, but I really respect what you're doing because this war is even going on in the Republican Party itself. Because,
Sure.
like how you said, there's people or Republicans who are trying to be more like taking the high road or whatever. But really, we need to be direct and address the facts. Like you mentioned, immigration. Even citizens who were illegal or they're from Mexico, their allegiance isn't to what their beliefs are regarding Republican values. It's about their family members who are deported. So when you look at California, since immigration in the 90s, the state has completely turned blue, and it's not based on other people's political views. It's based on that immigration. These are things that we need to address instead of saying, "Oh, we'll give them better ideas." It's not based on that. So I really respect you like addressing that from the core.
Thank you. You speak to angel families, and you guys, I gotta tell you, when you go down to the border, it's fun to talk about up here in Phoenix, but when you take that 3-hour trek down to the border, 3.5 hours, depending on where you're going, I gotta tell you something. It's a big problem. I mean, you have human trafficking like you've never seen. I mean, you want to talk about some of the scariest things you've ever seen. Cartels are more militarized than our own border patrol right down the border. They own portions of our border. This is happening in our country. This is incredible. I mean, 50 years ago, it would be unheard of, and today it's accepted and okay. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. Yeah.
Are you alarmed at all by any of the recent electoral results in Arizona within the past 4 years?
Very much so.
Fundraising
Yeah.
results for Arizona,
Very much so.
for both state parties?
Yep. Yeah, you see Arizona, and then I'll tell you something else too, a little insight about this particular race, this Senate race. This is about one issue. And mark my words, you heard it here first, sports fans. The number one issue here, okay, is Second Amendment. That's all this race is about. This is a race about the Second Amendment. What rights do we have as American citizens for our firearms? And you say, well, what do you mean? What does that all mean? Mark Kelly has been, for 10 years, invested in by the Democratic Party. 10 years. This gentleman has been paid for speaking engagements from corporate entities like you've never seen before. For 10 years, they've fostered the growth of this individual. They've been working hard. The Democrats have been working very hard to turn this state blue. And they've clawed and scratched for every little inch that they've gotten. So they are fighters. And if you, again, I'm just telling you guys this from the standpoint of reality. If you think that unconstitutional appointed senator that just lost is going to win this race, it is not going to happen. And I've been watching politics my whole life. She will lose terrible. So I would have thought, by the way, when I jumped into this, there would have been a lot more celebration from people, not just not just the trolls online. Yes, sir.
Sorry if this is a stupid question. I'm still pretty new to politics.
Yeah.
Do you think the divide between the two parties and it being so severe, do you see that as an issue, or how do you see that?
I do. I see it as a huge issue. But there is one beautiful thing to fix it, and it's our Constitution. The way that our Constitution is designed is so beautiful from the standpoint that if you want to live in an extremely liberal utopia, then you can do that in a state that provides that environment, and you can encourage that state to do that. Whereas if you want to live in more of a conservative environment, you can move to a state that kind of entices that activity. The federal government's job, frankly, is really just to bind together for a national crisis, a national war. So I think that government at home, but instead they can see that it's too corrupt, or it's the hill's too high to climb, and so they're not willing to do that when America's just right next door. So in a lot of ways, it's happening. That happens naturally because I think the best and the brightest are naturally attracted to America. And again, I know that's kind of American values or whatever. That's just the truth. Everyone's attracted to freedom. Everybody wants individual freedoms. That's the beautiful thing about what our Constitution grants us, is we granted the government the rights, not the other way around. We're not subjects to a king. So everybody's attracted to that because there's something inside of us, every one of us as an individual, that wants freedom and wants individual rights. So I'm going on a tangent for a reason, because we have to figure a way to leverage that ability, that beautiful country that we have, to get the best and the brightest from around the world to continue that growth and continue the innovation that we have. So a merit-based system that is sophisticated, we need to have a border though first. We cannot even debate immigration, in my opinion, until the border is secure. Once that happens, then it's time to conduct a thorough dissection of that.
So on the topic of merit-based immigration, have you looked at Australia's system?
A little. I've seen some kind of bullet points on it, but yeah.
Seems like a decent one to base off of.
I've heard similar sentiments from other people, yes.
Sorry,
No worries.
I have a lot of questions.
Please do.
So you were saying about merit-based, but usually the people, especially in the South, are seeking shelter here because of better opportunities, and they come from like an impoverished area, and usually those, like their test scores would be lower if you see that they have a lower income. So how would we establish that?
Back to kind of an initial analysis that I laid out. And I want to say this in a way that's not crass. I want to word this in a way that comes across with a tremendous amount of compassion. This comes from a guy. I have 4 kids. This world, in a lot of ways, is very unfair. There's a lot of things that happen that are unfair. And the best thing that we can do as a country, as Americans, is encourage other individuals around the world to adopt our views. But that's the extent of our responsibility. Meaning that when they teach you to, for example, when there's a crisis, okay, and you're a parent and there's a crisis as a parent, you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of your child. Because if you take care of your child first and there's a crisis going on, then you're leaving yourself exposed. You have to immediately take care of yourself.